Sorry. All right, good morning. This is the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. It is 9:30 in the morning and we are here with Allie Richards from Let's Grow Kids to talk about childcare in Vermont. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Keating. And hi, everyone. For the record, I'm Allie Richards, the CEO of Let's Grow Kids. Nice to see you all again. So I'm really here for you all. I'll just, I guess, do an opening to say that I just really appreciate you all engaging on this critical issue as a committee. Again, as I mentioned last time I was in here, historically in this session as well. And the high level observation is that we're really undertaking a transformation of an entire sector. That's serious business. It really requires fortitude and persistence and continual renewal and observation of what's happening. And that's, really why I'm pleased that you and your, colleagues in the other committees are leading in this year. Act 76 was historic, it's working, and we're doing a transformation here. So that's what this year is really all about. And again, as I mentioned, the notion that in Act 76, we said, here's $50 million general appropriation. Here's a 0.44% payroll tax. That's what we believe Vermonters can afford on this issue. And let's see how far it takes us. We're a year and a half in. It's taking us quite far. And we're transforming a system, and we need to sort of continue to, again, renew that commitment and understand what's happening on the ground. And so this year we have a unique opportunity to have organic growth in that payroll tax and see, how we can best use that in this context. I think that you're hearing from the treasurer that this program, first of all, has not even come close to maturing. We just broke it open. So that's number one. It's going to continue to expand at a pretty rapid growth curve, we hope, because that will be meeting the need and the estimates that we believe of Vermonters that are out there that are eligible already. And then what more is there to do? What gaps have we left in the system work that we've done so far? And can we continue to make progress? So your colleagues in House and Human Services are working very hard on that. They have a wonderful memo they're working on with the detail about reserving some, reinvesting some things such as inflationary rates for reimbursements for childcare programs. So really, I'm here today to, again, thank you all for really deeply engaging in this hard work of transformation and encourage you to support no permanent base reduction to childcare, to reject the governor's proposal for a permanent reduction in the base for that funding in the general fund, and to support your colleagues in Human Services with their recommendations of how best to utilize those funds.
Can you talk a little bit about the growth of programs, where we're seeing it, where we're not seeing it, how we need to look at how childcare opportunity is growing in the state?
Great question. So again, if you want to do a deep dive on real specifics, maps, charts, First Children's Finance Vermont would be an amazing resource to bring in and honestly to get to know for this committee particularly. I think you've heard me mention before, but I really can't emphasize enough when we're sort of doing the work of let's actually build the infrastructure of childcare in this state for the first time. Infrastructure needs sector supports. And First Children's Finance Vermont is basically the small business development center for childcare. It's like specialized business assistance for childcare, which is incredible on many levels. They basically are stretching the public investment as far as we can go because they're helping these programs grow, have efficient business practices, set up budgets and ratios of children in different ages to make sure they're maximizing economies of scale and really supporting supply and demand. So they're a fantastic resource on the ground for the duration, which we're very proud about the work that, they're funded with some state funding that we've all sort of done to sort of establish that. So they're a great resource. So to your question, though, about, I would say gaps are very clear. The beauty of what's happened with Act 76, we've seen 1,000 new spaces, 100 new programs, 50 new family childcare homes. We're sort of watering a dry ground and it's blossoming. We still have more blossoming to go. And then we'll get to a place where this is stabilizing and you'll need to do a little bit more like surgical work on where are we missing, what geographic regions are we missing that. What we're seeing is we're really getting there. We're getting there on the pre-K spaces across Vermont. We have some geographic deserts on the toddler age, a couple like regions or towns that just don't quite have enough. And where we're really seeing the gaps is infant capacity. That's where we've many thousands of childcare spaces to build to meet the current demand of how many infants need childcare. And that's really across Vermont, Vice Chair. And so that's a systemic problem, which is, again, why I believe it's so important we don't set a precedent to cut the base funding right now as we're growing, stabilizing, and have these gaps emerging. And that's what your colleagues are grappling with in human services right now. Can we make a systemic change, such as increasing the rates for infant care to basically let the system stabilize? So if you looked at a map today, and I'm giving you an imprecise answer because I don't have the data at my fingertips, so I do recommend First Children's Finance for that, you would see a dearth of infant spaces across Vermont. And that brings us to the systemic thing. And actually, yesterday, we got a preview of a wonderful new resource we're going to have, a true cost of childcare report. That's a tool now that First Children's Finance does for the state of Vermont for the Child Development Division. And it will show that the model that we've built through Act 76, you don't make money when you serve infants because of the ratios and the other requirements. So that's the sort of systemic change I hope we can sort of keep our eye on and make sure this is working for Vermonters and those gaps are not appearing.
And just, that's not new. We knew that before we started.
Always.
We know that if we want to take care of infants, we need more people to the number of infants, and that cost is a real cost that will never get mechanized. It will never, it will always be that cost.
Exactly. There's no way to cut corners, in other words, which is why when you have an efficient budget and program set up with the support of, say, First Children's Finance, you can get the ratio of pre-K, toddler, infants right so that you can create some economies of scale around, even within your own program. But even that, like you say, won't get us past that systemic problem. And thank you for that follow-up, because it opens the door for me to mention the most critical thing, and for this committee in particular, the early childhood education workforce. Again, Vermont AYC can come in and give you all detail on that. I really hope you do lean in. This is, again, a workforce issue of our lifetime here to create the first, profession of early childhood education. But what it is a workforce development initiative. It's to grow the sector. It's a field-led workforce effort that I really just do. I suggest that, you continue to lean into and look into, because it's a big deal. It's complicated. And it's really, truthfully, it's a workforce development pathway. And so we do need more early educators and have those pathways. And part of what your colleagues are actually looking at for the current resources, back to that, the budget issue, are workforce supports today that we can continue to encourage early child educators into the field. I'll give you one example. We have an amazing apprenticeship program. Actually, you all have spent some time with that over the years. It's really amazing program. These are Vermont students who want to go into early child education, who have the desire, are already on that track, and there's a wait list. So those are students who definitely want to go into a field that we need them in, with openings, with jobs that actually you can start to make a career out of finally, and they'll stay in Vermont for that. And they're on the wait list, so they're ready to go. We're looking for humans in so many ways with our workforce and demographic crisis, but there are some really wonderful opportunities here where those humans exist. We just need a sort of a little tiny bit of funding, pops them right off the wait list and into the sort of, pathway.
Sorry, so is there one sponsor for this program, for this child
Apprenticeship? Vermont AYC runs it. Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. They are the umbrella for coaching and mentoring for the field through a state-funded program called Sparks. It's really incredible. We're showing some really deep, authentic quality work through that support and coaching, continuous improvement work. And then they also have apprenticeship, and they also have a bunch of these other sort of student loan assistance programs. So there are pathways by which you can get a degree in early ed for free, which is really unique in Vermont and helps hit our higher ed issue, our demographic issue, and then our workforce issue. So we've been working as a community to build these pathways for a decade in some cases, because we knew one day we'd say, great, we've done the underlying policy work and now we need early educators. So that's a great thing. And again, another reason why I really do urge you to dig deeply with that workforce lens into this idea of growing the sector through the profession, because right now it's a mess. They call it a spaghetti map of like anyone who wants to be an early educator, how do I get in? And you can enter in a million places. And it's quite confusing. It's duplicative. You can end up with 200 credits and all the loans, for that when you really only need 100. So part of why the field is leading this initiative for licensure is because they would like to clean that up in like a really transparent 1, 2, 3, clear credentials, clear pathways. And we have all these underlying programs already in place that would just plug right into that.
Okay. Can you just speak for a minute, sort of big picture, long-term use of funds, general fund, payroll tax, just from your perspective, how you see the sort of difference between those and like the space funding?
Yeah.
Kind of, I guess, what is that long-term plan for those?
It's a great question, Abby. Thank you. So from my perspective, and so take it for what it's worth, someone who has been in this role for 10 years, watching this very carefully, really hands dirty with it. The base funding was what helped us keep the payroll tax at a 0.44%. So putting more pressure than necessary on that payroll tax is not really something that anybody wants if you can avoid it. I have been talking to the business community. And again, remember, they're not a monolith. So when I say this, I really want to be clear about that. But a lot of business folks from small, medium, and large businesses that come in also individually, but through like chambers and networks. So you do get a pretty good sense of the feel and of what's happening on the ground. The sense was a modest payroll tax would be worth it for a strategic investment in childcare. And that's why you see businesses actually writing that open letter that was in Digger yesterday, this concept of the appropriation and the tax that we helped fight for, that we're paying for. The promise was to fix the childcare system with that. The promise was it's strategic investment in childcare for the future of Vermont and sustainability, right? So that's sort of where we are today. And they also will say, we'd like to see that not creep up much farther than the 0.44% rate if possible. Because what we're doing is balancing affordability in Vermont, and a lot of folks will say, that 0.44%, it's not that much. It's not breaking my bank. And I see that it's working for childcare. So I think the idea is, Abby, that if you keep the base funding strong, you don't put undue pressure on that payroll tax. How I would see this going is over the next couple of years, let's say 3 to 5 years, you'll see some stabilization. As I mentioned, this is transforming a system. So we haven't built thousands of spaces that are needed today for the need. We haven't gotten many more unknown, because the data is not great, number of early educators. Once you start seeing that stabilize, you're going to have a sense of, have we fully funded this, in a couple of years? And once you see that, then I think it's going to be a question for lawmakers and everybody watching this carefully. Anytime there's an overage, do we put it in a reserve or do we bring it back to the general fund then? Do you know what I'm saying? Like once it stabilizes, we're going to have a happy problem of understanding if we have met the gaps for supply, demand, and quality. What I really, again, want to urge thank you for that question, because it sort of helps me paint a picture. This is a multi-year transformation, right? And that's what we're really doing. We're in year 3 of that. What I would say is it will be so much harder to look for the money. This is an entitlement program now. So let's say in 3 years, we kept skimming that money off the top to the general fund, and all of a sudden we built those 5,000 infant spaces and all eligible Vermonters are in this. And you all have to look for money, either in the general fund or increasing the tax rate. That's sort of a problem we would really all collectively like to avoid. That makes sense.
Other questions for Ellen?
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm sorry, Ms. the test.
You know it all already.
I think I'm a little familiar with the dynamics, and I'm happy to see, your proposal there. How long do you think it will take to get a better idea of what the actual need is in terms of caseload and things like that?
Yeah. That's sort of to Representative Duke's question, I think. Well, no, it's just like, what's the long-term vision here? I think it's going to be, again, I'm sort of, as I mentioned at the top, we've undertaken a massive sector transformation. Basically, childcare wasn't considered infrastructure forever. And we're at the beginning of reversing that and investing in it and seeing what's happening. So as far as caseload for like who's eligible today is question number one. We have to build the spaces and we have to get the early educators and we got to make sure eligible Vermonters know. So that's like a multi-dimensional chess. I would say, a couple years, Representative Wilson, to really have the sector stabilize from what is already done. And as I sort of urged the committee at the top of the conversation, we owe it to Vermonters to keep our eye on this one and make sure that we didn't have unintended consequences, right? Like, so if you say in 3 years, great, we're pretty sure we've saturated the market with spaces and with people and eligible Vermonters in. Have we created a benefits cliff, right? Then you sort of look and see beyond Act 76, are there gaps? So I would say it's like 2 phases.
Great. They strongly support that kind of approach to dealing with the issue. Right?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for your leadership and really digging into the details over the last couple of weeks.
Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna stick with our running ahead of schedule today.
Perfect.
I guess we can go off live and we will be back here at 10.